Let's get settled in here. So, I don't really have a script today, so this will be a sort of fireside chat, really, firing from the hip. So with the news media I've been following the last couple of days, they have just gone completely nuts. The fallout from the Virginia election has made them go completely insane, more so than they already have. In case this isn't obvious already, I'm a bit of an elitist, but if the video was anything to go by, I am Clan CAE. I don't know everything, but I know enough to know that the package the left is pushing is the same one that has failed repeatedly in the past. It just has a pretty new bow on it, but it's still not addressing any of the reasons why it has failed in the past. So, when I analyze news, what I try and do is I make myself the lowest common denominator, sort of boil it down to the most basic things I can to try and make sense of it. Even doing that, the news makes zero sense, and it is fascinating to watch it unfold, because watching the left, even across their own anchors and writers, they're still contradicting themselves, not even across CNN and MSNBC, or Dumb and Dumber as I like to call them, but even internally at each network. So you watch Van Jones, who is an unholy partisan, but even he mentions the issues. So say crime, inflation, concerns about their children, and that the Dems are annoying and offensive and out of touch, which is all true. But the Dems' answers to these questions is always the same. It's always more state involvement. And that's not what people want. That's also not very effective. The problem is not the messenger, it's the message. Actually, no, I take that back. It is also the messenger, because the messenger would just insult the person they gave the message to, so there is a bit of overlap. But the product they're selling is just bad, and people simply don't want to buy it. And watching their reaction is just mind-blowingly baffling. Because I've asked this before, the news anchors, the corporate press, do they really believe the crap that they're spewing? Because I'm wondering how long can you be in this sphere, this echo chamber, before it starts affecting your psyche and you start buying your own propaganda? Because these people aren't the arbiters of truth, let's be honest. They're glorified fairy tale tellers. The only difference between them and the old town nutter on the box yelling about the incoming apocalypse is a suit. And that's it. If you listen to them, apolitically, objectively comparative to the real world, they sound unhinged and demented, in need of a straitjacket. Like I said, they can't learn despite openly admitting they can see the problem. But what they can't see is they are part of the problem, because it requires them to admit they are part of the problem, which these arrogant charlatans will never do, or rather, they can't do maybe for contractual reasons. But they bring up the numbers. They see white women breaking heavily for Youngkin, and their reaction is to double down and call them racist. Who the hell does that? Explain to me how on earth this is going to get people back to voting for you. So, this is requiring some concretization of speculation, so let's just take this at face value. CNN comes out and says the Republicans have a Trump problem. This is them trying to cope, by the way. The Youngkin won in spite of Trump's endorsement, which is insane. Youngkin won because he distanced himself from Trump. So they see the white woman backlash, they talk about it on the air, and Youngkin may have distanced himself from Trump in whatever way they think that happened. You, however, CNN and MSNBC, you did not. You mentioned Trump and Youngkin together constantly. And according to you, those voters watch you. Not some right-wing news sources. They don't watch Fox, they watch you. And still, they voted for Youngkin. Now, if you were objective and rational, things the corporate press never are, there are some things that you could potentially extrapolate from this rock and ass kicking, such as, what does that tell you about your horridly biased assumptions? Maybe Trump is not that unpopular. Maybe he is not the kiss of death that you make him out to be. Maybe the Democrats really, really suck. Maybe they suck so badly that even the Trump acolyte is better. And maybe, because of all of the above, comparing the Dems to the previous guy who is by far more successful than the crappy administration you're pathetically still simping for is a very, very bad strategy. Again, this is something that they will never admit to. They have a narrative to sell. It just happens to be no one is buying it. So, something that I read yesterday, and this is pretty good because I didn't think about this up until I read it. What really blew the CRT thing up, funnily enough, is their own COVID school policies. Because the schools were closed, the kids are at home, they're on Zoom during the school hours, and the parents would hear it and ask, what the hell are you teaching my kid? So they go to the school board to air their grievances, and then the FBI gets called on them. The Attorney General gets involved, and parents are labeled domestic terrorists. Which doesn't help when the current governor comes out and says, you don't get to tell taxpayer teachers what they teach your kid. The state owns them. So, naturally, they feel disenfranchised, and they vote for Youngkin. And then they see the resulting Youngkin winning, and the corporate press, flat out, keeps calling them racist. I mean, the lieutenant governor is a black lady by the name of Winsome Sears, who was actually served. I notice no one at MSNBC or CNN will acknowledge that she even exists, let alone that she won. Obviously, due to the fact that she's a black woman and a Republican, which would destroy their narrative. She said to the token black racist Joy Reid over at MSNBC, have her on the show. Never in a million years will that happen, because Sears would beat the living daylights out of her. And everyone knows this. Everyone at MSNBC knows this, and they can't have that kind of a disaster live on the air. And the Dems cannot have a strong, independent-thinking black female Republican because that is their kryptonite. I think the most loyal voting base the Democrats have are black women. It's something like 90% or over 90%. I could be wrong. And at no point during any of this does anyone in the Democratic establishment actually listen to their own voters' grievances, except the Republican. And in the middle of a completely incompetent administration, all they did was chastise, belittle, or just straight up ignore the plight of their own voters. And then the voters give them the middle finger and pull the lever for Youngkin, and the media just keeps insulting them. If you were a strategist, what the hell do you say to this? I'm genuinely curious. Do these news corporations just think that this sort of, I don't know, guilt-tripping, socially engineered blowback is that potent that people would destroy their own livelihood just because some idiots keep insulting them? That insulting them would actually cause them to get on their knees and pathetically grovel back to the arrogant elitists who keep belittling them? Because that concept is so unbelievably demoralizing and toxic. I am baffled as to how anyone bar a complete sociopath would even think that's a viable strategy. Because like I said, people don't change their politics unless it affects them personally, and when something provokes them. This did more than provoke them. They already had a long list of grievances thanks to the incompetent administration, and the CRT was just the thing that pushed it over the edge because it came after their families. And now the mask is completely gone and they get to see the real face of the Democrats. Arrogant, condescending elitists with nothing to offer them bar shut the hell up and do as you're told. And still, not a single change in their policies or their attitude to get their Democratic voters back. And that's all for today. Until next time.